Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On July the 4th, the country voted for change. This government was given a mandate to restore stability to our economy and to begin a decade of national renewal. To fix the foundations and deliver change through responsible leadership in the national interest. That is our task, and I know that we can achieve it. My belief in Britain burns brighter than ever, and the prize on offer is immense. As my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said on Monday, change must be felt. More pounds in people's pockets, an NHS that is there when you need it, an economy that is growing, creating wealth and opportunity for all, because that is the only way to improve living standards. And the only way to drive economic growth is to invest, invest, invest. There are no shortcuts. And to deliver that investment, we must restore economic stability and turn the page on the last 14 years. This is not the first time that it has fallen to the Labour Party to rebuild Britain. In 1945, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our country from the rubble of the Second World War. In 1964, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt Britain with the white heat of technology. And in 1997, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our schools and hospitals. Today, it falls to this Labour Party, to this Labour government, to rebuild Britain once again. And while this is the first budget in more than 14 years to be delivered by a Labour Chancellor, it is the first budget in our country's history to be delivered by a woman. I am deeply proud to be Britain's first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer. To girls and young women everywhere, I say, let there be no ceiling on your ambition, your hopes, and your dreams. And along with the pride that I feel standing here today, there is also a responsibility to pass on a fairer society and a stronger generation to the next generation of women. Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite failed our country. Their austerity broke our National Health Service. Their Brexit deal harmed British businesses. And their mini-budget left families paying the price with higher mortgages. The British people have inherited their failure. A black hole in the public finances. Public services on their knees. A decade of low growth and the worst Parliament on record for living standards. Let me begin with the public finances. In July, I exposed a £22 billion black hole at the heart of the previous government's plans. A series of promises that they made but had no money to deliver. Covered up from the British people, covered up from this House. The Treasury's reserve, set aside for genuine emergencies, spent 3 times over, just 3 months into the financial year. Let us now turn to our high street businesses. I know for them, a major source of concern is business rates. From 2026-27, we intend to introduce 2 permanently lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure properties, which make up the backbone of our high streets across the country. And it is our intention that it is paid for by a higher multiplier for the most valuable properties. But the previous government created a cliff edge next year as temporary reliefs end. So I will today provide 40% relief on business rates for the retail, hospitality and leisure industry in 2025-26, up to a cap of £110,000 per business. Alongside this, the small business tax multiplier will be frozen next year. Since July, I have been urged on multiple occasions to reconsider these cuts, to increase the taxes that working people pay and see in their payslips. But I have made an important choice today, to keep every single commitment that we made on tax in our manifesto. So I say to working people, I will not increase your national insurance, I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax. Working people will not see higher taxes in their payslips as a result of the choices that I am making today. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. But any responsible Chancellor would need to make difficult decisions today, to raise the revenues required to fund our public services and to restore economic stability. So in today's budget, I am announcing an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. We will increase the rate of employers' national insurance by 1.2 percentage points to 15% from April 2025. And we will reduce the secondary threshold, the level at which employers start paying national insurance on each employee's salary, from £9,100 a year to £5,000. This will raise £25 billion per year by the end of the forecast period. I know that this is a difficult choice. I do not take this decision lightly. We are asking businesses to contribute more, and I know that there will be impacts of this measure felt beyond businesses too, as the OBR has set out today. But in the circumstances...
Using the internet without a VPN is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. We want to help protect you. This video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the VPN to help keep you safe. Now you might be asking, what is a VPN? Well, a virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Whenever you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi network, such as at airports, coffee shops, friends' houses, or even in your own home, your data is at risk of being stolen. Hackers that are connected to the same Wi-Fi network have the ability to steal your personal data with ease. T-Mobile reached a settlement this year with the US Federal Communications Commission after they suffered data breaches in 2021, 22, and 23. In 2023 alone, over 37 million customers' data was exposed. And it's not just hackers to be concerned about. Information can be censored. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news content that you love. Private Internet Access is available for all platforms: Windows, macOS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one Private Internet Access subscription to protect an unlimited number of devices at the same time. Plus, we've got a huge GB News discount. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get 83% off PIA. That is under £2 a month, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So head to piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
And I have listened closely to my honourable friends for Easington, Doncaster Central, Blaenau Gwent and Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock on this issue. Today we are keeping our promise so that working people who powered our country receive the fair pension that they are owed. Our manifesto committed to the triple lock, meaning spending on the state pension is forecast to rise by over £31 billion by 2029-30 to ensure that our pensioners are protected in their retirement. This commitment means that while working age benefits will be uprated in line with CPI at 1.7%, the basic and new state pension will be uprated by 4.1% in 2025-26. This means that over 12 million pensioners will gain up to £470 next year, up to £275 more than if uprated by inflation. The pension credit standard minimum guarantee will also rise by 4.1%, from around £11,400 per year to around £11,850 a year for a single pensioner. I am also funding significant improvements to our roads network. For too long, potholes have been an all too visible reminder of our failure to invest as a nation. Today, that changes. With £500 million increase in road maintenance budgets next year, more than delivering on our manifesto commitment to fix an additional 1 million potholes each year. We will provide over £650 million of local transport funding to improve connections across our country, in towns like Crewe and Grimsby, and in our villages and rural areas from Cornwall to Cumbria. And while the previous government's policy was for the bus fare cap to end this December, we understand how important bus services are for our communities. And so we will extend the cap for a further year, setting it at £3 until December 2025. That's why today I can confirm that we will implement in full the 10 recommendations from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibilities Review. But the country has inherited not just broken public finances, but broken public services too. The British people can see and they can feel that in their everyday lives. NHS waiting lists at record levels. Children in porter cabins as school roofs crumble. Trains that do not arrive, rivers filled with polluted waste, prisons overflowing, crimes which are not investigated, and criminals who are not punished. That is the country's inheritance from the party opposite. But they had no plan to improve our public services. And they had no plan to put our public finances on a stable footing. Quite the opposite. Since 2021, there have been no detailed plans for departmental spending set out beyond this year. And their plans relied on a baseline for spending this year, which we now know was wrong, because it did not take into account the £22 billion black hole. The previous government also failed to budget for costs that they knew would materialise. That includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims of two terrible injustices.
Respecting colleagues. The public are watching. They want to hear what the Chancellor has to say.
I would politely suggest that honourable members listen to this, because it includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims of two terrible injustices: the infected blood scandal and the Post Office Horizon scandal.
No money.
The Leader of the Opposition rightly made an unequivocal apology for the injustice of the infected blood scandal on behalf of the British state. But he did not budget for the costs of compensation. Today, for the very first time, we will provide specific funding to compensate those infected and those affected in full. With £11.8 billion in this budget. And I am also today setting aside £1.8 billion to compensate victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal, redress that is long overdue for the pain and injustice that they have suffered. We will close the loophole created by the previous government, made even bigger when the lifetime allowance was abolished, by bringing inherited pensions into inheritance tax from April 2027. Finally, we will reform agricultural property relief and business property relief. From April 2026, the first £1 million of combined business and agricultural assets will continue to attract no inheritance tax at all. But for assets over £1 million, inheritance tax will apply with a 50% relief at an effective rate of 20%. This will ensure that we continue to protect small family farms and three-quarters of claims unaffected by these changes. I can also announce that we will apply a 50% relief in all circumstances on inheritance tax for shares on the alternative investment market and other similar markets, setting the effective rate of tax at 20%. Taken together, these measures raise over £2 billion by the final year of the forecast. To protect working people with measures to reduce the cost of living, I've had to take some very difficult decisions on tax. I want to set out my approach to fuel duty. Baked into the numbers that I inherited from the previous government is an assumption that fuel duty will rise by RPI next year and that the temporary 5p cut will be reversed. To retain the 5p cut and to freeze fuel duty again would cost over £3 billion next year. At a time when the fiscal position is so difficult, I have to be frank with the House that this is a substantial commitment to make. I have concluded that in these difficult circumstances, while the cost of living remains high, and with a backdrop of global uncertainty, increasing fuel duty next year would be the wrong choice for working people. It would mean fuel duty rising by 7p per litre. So I have decided today to freeze fuel duty next year, and I will maintain the existing 5p cut for another year too. There will be no higher taxes at the petrol. There will be no higher taxes at the petrol pumps next year. Madam Deputy Speaker, we want to support the take-up of electric vehicles, so I will maintain the incentives for electric vehicles in company car tax from 2028 and increase the differential between fully electric and other vehicles in the first-year rates of vehicle excise duty from April 2025. These measures will raise around £400 million by the end of the forecast period. Finally, 94% of children in the UK attend state schools. To provide the highest quality of support and teaching that they deserve, we will introduce VAT on private school fees from January 2025. And we will shortly introduce legislation to remove their business rates relief from April 2025 too. We said in our manifesto that these changes, alongside our measures to tackle tax avoidance, would bring in £8.5 billion in the final year of the forecast. I can confirm today that they will in fact raise over £9 billion to support our public services and restore our public finances. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. Next, the fund management industry provides a vital contribution to our economy. But as our manifesto set out, there needs to be a fairer approach to the way that carried interest is taxed. So we will increase the capital gains rates on carried interest to 32% from April 2025. And from April 2026, we will deliver further reform to ensure that the specific rules for carried interest are simpler, fairer and better targeted. In our manifesto, we committed to reforming stamp duty land tax to raise revenues while supporting those buying their first home. We are increasing the stamp duty land tax surcharge for second homes, known as the higher rate for additional dwellings, by 2 percentage points to 5%, which will come into effect from tomorrow. This will support over 130,000 additional transactions from people buying their first home or moving home over the next 5 years. We committed in our manifesto to build 1.5 million homes over the course of this Parliament. And my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, is driving that work forward across government. Today, I am providing over £5 billion of government investment to deliver our plans on housing next year. We will increase the Affordable Homes Programme to £3.1 billion, delivering thousands of new homes. We will provide £3 billion worth of support in guarantees to boost the supply of homes and support our small house builders. And we will provide investment to renovate sites across our country, including at Liverpool Central Docks, where we will deliver 2,000 new homes, and funding to help Cambridge realise its full growth potential. Alongside this investment, we will put the right policies in place to increase the supply of affordable housing. Having heard representations from local authorities, social housing providers, and from Shelter, I can today confirm that the government will reduce right-to-buy discounts and local authorities will be able to retain the full receipts from any sales of social housing so that we can reinvest them back into the housing stock and into new supply. By doing this, we will give more people a safe, secure and affordable place to live. We will provide stability to social housing providers with a social housing rent settlement of CPI plus 1% for the next 5 years. And we will deliver on our manifesto commitment to hire hundreds of new planning officers to get Britain building again. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final decision to take on tax today. The previous government froze income tax and national insurance thresholds in 2021, and then they did so again after the mini-budget. Extending their threshold freeze for a further 2 years raises billions of pounds, money to deal with the black hole in our public finances and repair our public services. Having considered this issue closely, I have come to the conclusion that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their payslips. I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto. So there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds beyond the decisions by the previous government. From 2028-29, personal tax thresholds will be uprated in line with inflation once again. When it comes to choices on tax, this government chooses to protect working people every single time. Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we made a number of commitments to raise funding for our public services. First, I have always said that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here too. So today I can confirm we will abolish the non-dom tax regime. Remove the outdated concept of domicile from the tax system from April 2025. We will introduce a new residence-based scheme with internationally competitive arrangements for those coming to the UK on a temporary basis, while closing the loopholes in the scheme designed by the party opposite. To further encourage investment into the UK, we will also extend the temporary repatriation relief to 3 years and expand its scope, bringing billions of pounds of new funds into Britain. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility say that this package of measures will raise £12.7 billion over the next 5 years. Second, I have heard representations from colleagues across this House about the carers allowance and the impact of the current policy on carers looking to increase the hours that they work, including from the Honourable Members for Shipley, the Honourable Member for Scarborough and Whitby, and the Right Honourable Member for Kingston and Surbiton too. Carers allowance currently provides up to £81.90 per week to help those with additional caring responsibilities. Today I can confirm that we are increasing the weekly earnings limit to the equivalent of 16 hours at the national living wage per week. the largest increase in carers allowance since it was introduced in 1976. This means that a carer can now earn over £10,000 a year while receiving carers allowance, allowing them to increase their hours where they want to and keep more of their money. I am also concerned about the cliff edge in the current system and the issue of overpayments. My right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary, has announced an independent review to look at the issue of overpayments, and we will work across this House to develop the right solutions. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we set out the fiscal rules that would guide this government. I am confirming those today. Our stability rule and our investment rule. The stability rule means that we will bring the current budget into balance so that we do not borrow to fund day-to-day spending. We will meet this rule in 2029-30 until that becomes the third year of the forecast. From then on, we will balance the current budget in the third year of every budget held annually each autumn. That will provide a tougher constraint on day-to-day spending so that difficult decisions cannot be constantly delayed or deferred. The OBR say that the current budget will be in deficit by £26.2 billion in 2025-26 and £5.2 billion in 2026-27, before moving into surplus of £10.9 billion in 2027-28, £9.3 billion in 2028-29 and £9.9 billion in 2029-30, meeting our stability rule 2 years early. Monthly public sector finance data show that government borrowing in the first 6 months of this year was already running significantly higher than the OBR's March forecast. And so the OBR confirmed today that borrowing in this financial year is now £127 billion, reflecting the inheritance left by the party opposite. The increase in the net cash requirement in 2024-25 is lower than the increase in borrowing, at £22.3 billion higher than the spring forecast. Because of the action that we are taking, borrowing falls from 4.5% of GDP this year to 2.1% of GDP by the end of the forecast. Public sector net borrowing will be £105.6 billion in 2025-26, £88.5 billion in 2026-27, £72.2 billion in 2027-28, £71.9 billion in 2028-29, and £70.6 billion in 2029-2030. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I come to tax, it is vital that we are driving efficiency and reducing wasteful spending. In July, to begin delivering and dealing with our inheritance, I made £5.5 billion of savings this year. Today, we are setting a 2% productivity, efficiency and savings target for all departments to meet next year, by using technology more effectively and joining up services across government. As set out in our manifesto, I will shortly be appointing our COVID Corruption Commissioner. They will lead our work to uncover those companies that used a national emergency to line their own pockets, because that money belongs in our public services and taxpayers want that money back. And I can confirm today that David Goldstone has been appointed as the chair of the new Office for Value for Money to help us realise the benefits from every pound of public spending. Frozen next year. Next, I can confirm that alcohol duty rates on non-draft products will increase in line with RPI from February next year. But nearly 2/3 of alcoholic drinks sold in pubs are served on draft. So today, instead of uprating these products in line with inflation, I am cutting draft duty by 1.7%. Which means a penny off the pints in the pub. Alongside the changes I am making today, I am publishing a corporate tax roadmap, providing the business certainty called for by the CBI, the British Chambers of Commerce and the Institute. Excellent. There is no more important job for government than to keep our country safe, and we are conducting a strategic defence review to be published next year. And as set out in our manifesto, we will set a path to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence at a future fiscal event. Today, I am announcing a total increase to the Ministry of Defence's budget of £2.9 billion next year, ensuring that the UK comfortably exceeds our NATO commitments and providing guaranteed military support to Ukraine of £3 billion per year for as long as it takes. Last week, alongside my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, I announced in addition to this, further support to Ukraine, on top of our NATO commitment, through our £2.26 billion contribution to the G7's Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Agreement, repaid using profits from immobilised Russian sovereign assets. And as we approach Remembrance Sunday, it is vital that we take time to remember those who have served our country so bravely. So I am today announcing funding to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE and VJ Day next year, to honour those who have served at home and abroad. Madam Deputy Speaker, I come to our most cherished public service of all, our NHS. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is beginning to repair the damage of the last 14 years. In our first week in office, he commissioned an independent report into the state of our health service by Lord Darcy. Its conclusions were damning. While our NHS staff do a remarkable job, and we thank them for it, it is clear that in so many areas, we are moving in the wrong direction. 100,000 infants waited over 6 hours in A&E last year. 350,000 people are waiting a year for mental health support. Cancer deaths here higher than in other countries. It is simply unforgivable. In the spring, we will publish a 10-year plan for the NHS to deliver a shift from hospital to community, from analogue to digital, and from sickness to prevention. Today, we are announcing a down payment on that plan to enable the NHS to deliver 2% productivity growth next year. These reforms are vital, but we should be honest. The state of the NHS that we have inherited after, and I quote Lord Darcy, the most austere decade since the NHS was founded, investments. So today, because of the difficult decisions that I have taken on tax, welfare and spending, I can announce that I am providing a £22.6 billion increase in the day-to-day health budget and a £3.1 billion increase in the capital budget over this year and next. This is the largest real terms growth in day-to-day NHS spending outside of COVID since 2010. Let me set out what this funding is delivering. Many NHS buildings have been left in a state of disrepair. So we will provide £1 billion of health capital investment next year to address the backlog of repairs and upgrades across our NHS. To increase capacity for tens of thousands more procedures next year, we will provide a further £1.5 billion for new beds in hospitals across our country, new capacity for over 1 million additional diagnostic tests, and new surgical hubs and diagnostic centres, so that people waiting for their treatment can get it as quickly as possible. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will be setting out further details of his review into the new hospital programme in the coming weeks and publishing in the new year. But I can tell the House today that work will continue at pace to deliver those 7 hospitals affected by the RAC crisis, including West Suffolk Hospital in Bury St Edmunds and Leighton Hospital in Crewe. And finally, because of this record injection of funding, because of the thousands of additional beds that we have secured, and because of the reforms that we are delivering in our NHS, we can now begin to bring waiting lists down more quickly and move towards our target for waiting times to be no longer than 18 weeks. By delivering on our manifesto commitment for 40,000 extra hospital appointments a week, that is the difference that this Labour government is making.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the day that he took office, the Prime Minister said that he wanted to restore trust to British politics with action, not words. Well, today, his actions speak for themselves, with a budget that contains broken promise after broken promise, and reveals the simple truth that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have not been straight with the British people. Time and again, we Conservatives warned Labour would tax, borrow and spend far beyond what they were telling the country. And time and again, they denied they had such plans. But today, the truth has come out. Proof that they planned to do this all along. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, today's budget sees the fiscal rules fiddled, borrowing increased by billions of pounds, inflation-busting handouts for the trade unions, Britain's poorest pensioners, Britain's poorest...
Order! Just as we respected the Chancellor and heard her speak, we will hear the Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, Britain's poorest pensioners squeezed, welfare spending out of control, and a spree of tax rises they promised the working people of this country they would not do. National insurance, up. Capital gains tax, up. Inheritance tax, up. Energy taxes, up. Business rates, up. First-time buyer stamp duty, up. Pensions tax, up. They have fiddled the figures. They don't like it, Mr. Speaker. They don't like it, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The public will also want to hear what the Leader of the Opposition has to say. And shouting whilst I can see you will mean that you will not be called to speak later on. Simmer.
They don't like it, but this is the truth. They have fiddled the figures. They have raised tax to record levels. They have broken their promises, and it is the working people of this country that are going to pay the price. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor and Prime Minister have tried to say that they had no choice, but be in no doubt. Their misleading claims about the state of the economy are nothing but a cynical political device. Today's situation is a world away from the genuinely bleak legacy that we Conservatives inherited from the last Labour government. The Chancellor forgot to point out, borrowing £1 in every 4 that they spent. Debt rising every year and unemployment at 8%. Now, I understand the Chancellor's shameless political motivations, why it suits her to cook up a false justification for her agenda. But today, the OBR has, in fact, declined to back up her claims of a fictional £22 billion black hole. It actually appears nowhere in their report, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is deeply, deeply disappointing that she has sought to politicise the independent OBR that should be above party politics. But as she now knows, her playing politics has done real damage to our economy. She talked about being a Bank of England economist. Well, as the Bank of England's former chief economist has said, Labour's approach has generated fear and foreboding and uncertainty amongst consumers, businesses and investors. The rhetoric of this Chancellor and this Prime Minister damaging the British economy for political purposes. Now, you only need to look at the facts to see that the Chancellor's claims about her economic inheritance are nonsense. Labour inherited an economy with inflation back at its 2% target, mortgage rates being cut and unemployment low. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we left office, the United Kingdom was the fastest growing advanced economy in the world. And when it comes to the public finances, not once has the Chancellor acknowledged that we took the right decision to spend £500 billion to protect the British people from the impact of COVID and Putin's war. And let me remind you, not only did the party opposite support all those interventions, they wanted us to go even further, Madam Deputy Speaker. And when I made the tough choices to fix the public finances afterwards, the Prime Minister and Chancellor opportunistically opposed me every step of the way. So I will take no lectures from those two about difficult decisions. But because of those decisions that we made, the Chancellor inherited lower borrowing than France, America, Italy and Japan, and the second lowest debt in the entire G7. So any which way you look at it, Labour's claims about their inheritance are purely ludicrous. These are her choices, so stop blaming everyone else and take responsibility for them. Let me turn to the substance of those choices. During the election, the Chancellor repeatedly promised that her plans were fully funded. Only a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said the budget would balance the books. But this budget does no such thing and reveals they have not been straight with the British people.
I can see you, even when you're hiding behind another colleague. Yelling across the chamber is not on. The public and our constituents are watching. I know emotions are high, and I expect some noise, but have the confidence to shout closer, and I will definitely call you out. Leader of the Opposition.
A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said the budget would balance the books. But this budget does no such thing and reveals that they haven't been straight with the British people, because today the Chancellor has launched an enormous borrowing spree, saddling our children and grandchildren with billions upon billions pounds more debt, pushing up interest rates, leaving our economy more exposed to future shocks, and leading the OBR today to now forecast higher inflation in every year of the forecast. And her decision to let borrowing rip make a total nonsense of her claims on the state of the public finances. Because if they truly were in such a dire strait, as she has said, what we should have seen today is a significant reduction in borrowing to repair them, not the splurge that she's just unleashed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Instead, what we see today, borrowing higher in every year of the forecast, debt higher in every year of the forecast. Now she has tried to cover up that splurge by fiddling the fiscal rules. According to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the new measure will not actually even be a constraint on the amount she can borrow. And it is hard to escape the suspicion, they say, that the government is attracted to this change by the fact that it would allow for significantly more borrowing without any need for tough choices elsewhere. Fiscal fiddling is what they have called it. And the Chancellor herself actually agrees, because she specifically told the British people she wouldn't change the debt target. Because, and I quote, she said, "I'm not going to fiddle the figures to get better results." But that is exactly what she has done. She has gone back on her word and fiddled the figures so that she can borrow billions more. Broken promise after broken promise, and working people will pay the price. Now, the reason the Chancellor has increased borrowing and increased taxes is because she has totally failed to grip public spending. First, she has no meaningful plan. First, she has no meaningful plan to deliver the £20 billion worth of savings available if the public sector returned simply to its pre-pandemic levels of productivity. Instead, one of the first things the Chancellor did was to hand out inflation-busting pay rises to the unions without getting any productivity-enhancing reforms in return. The Chancellor also scrapped her predecessor's plan to get the civil service back to its pre-pandemic numbers. She doesn't seem to think that the civil service can be reduced by a single person. And the Chancellor has no plan to control welfare spending. Yet if we simply got working-age welfare spending on people with a disability or health condition back to pre-COVID levels, that would free up £30 billion worth of savings. So whether it is scrapping our plans to shrink the civil service or their failure to control welfare spending, this is not her inheritance, Madam Deputy Speaker. These are her choices. And the result, higher spending, higher borrowing, higher taxes. It's broken promise after broken promise, and working people paying the price. And Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn next to growth and remind the Prime Minister and Chancellor that they did in fact inherit the fastest growing economy in the G7, and that is testament to the last government boosting investment by introducing full expensing, increasing the labour supply by expanding childcare, reforming welfare and cutting tax on work. All decisions the OBR said would increase growth. Now, the Chancellor has said that growing the economy is the government's #1 priority. The Prime Minister even said that higher growth would come very quickly. Well, to be fair, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have had a rapid impact on growth. As their plans for the economy became clear, survey after survey showed business confidence plummeting. And no wonder. The government's own assessment says its French-style labour laws will impose a £5 billion... Well, they will be explaining it to the businesses in their constituency that their labour laws, by their own assessment, will impose a £5 billion direct cost on business, disproportionately hitting smaller businesses. And as business group after business group has pointed out, the tax rises on jobs and enterprise in today's budget will hobble growth. A poll tax on business is what they've called it. But despite these record-breaking tax rises, despite fiddling the figures, despite letting borrowing soar, today the OBR has forecast growth is going to be lower under this government than it was forecast to be under the Conservatives. That's the change they have brought. But Madam Deputy Speaker, this is what happens when the Labour Party is led by people who have no experience of business and enterprise. Relentlessly talking down our our economy, delivering a tidal wave of anti-business regulations, destroying our flexible labour market and raising taxes to the highest level in our country's history. It's the classic Labour agenda: higher taxes, higher borrowing, no plan for growth, and working people paying the price. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, during the election campaign, the Prime Minister specifically said there would be no tax surprises under Labour. The Chancellor went even further, saying she wanted to bring taxes down. Each time they made these promises, we warned they were not telling the truth. And today, the Chancellor and Prime Minister have done what they were always planning to do, but chose to get hidden from the British people. Far from reducing taxes as a result of today's budget, never in the history of our country will taxes be higher than they are under this Labour government. Now, they specifically promised that they wouldn't raise tax on working people. The Chancellor said Labour will not put up income tax, national insurance or VAT. Just this month, the Prime Minister gave, and I quote, an absolute commitment to not raising tax on working people. So what does today's budget do? It raises tax on working people by increasing national insurance and breaking Labour's promise. As the Independent Institute of Fiscal Studies have said, this is a straightforward breach of their manifesto. Because as the OBR have made clear, this tax rise is passed through entirely to working people. Even since she started speaking, the IFS have already confirmed that the vast majority of this tax increase will hit working people through lower pay. But you don't need to take it from the IFS or even the OBR. You can take it from the Chancellor herself. She has previously described her tax rise as a jobs tax, which takes money out of people's pockets. And not only that, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor also said the problem with national insurance is that it is a tax purely on people who go to work and those who employ them. So far from protecting working people, she is literally raising the only major tax that exclusively hits working people. But it doesn't stop there. Businesses on the British high street, your taxes are going up. Businesses investing in British energy, your taxes are going up. The small business owner looking to reap the rewards of years spent growing a business and creating jobs, your taxes are going up. The young couple saving to buy their first home, your taxes are going up. The family...
Mr. Streeting, you promised me this morning. Let's try and keep our promises.
I'm sure the front bench were explaining to the young couple and their constituency saving to buy their first home that their taxes are going up. To the family wanting to pass on their farm or their business to their children, your taxes are going up. The parents sacrificing to give their kids the best start in life, your taxes are going up. They're taxing your job, they're taxing your business, they're taxing your home, they're taxing your savings. I said it during the election campaign, you name it, they will tax it, and that is exactly what they have done. Broken promise after broken promise, and working people paying the price. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, from the final time, from this dispatch box, let me deliver.
He's wiped the floor with Rachel.
Let me deliver some basic truths. Government can foster growth, but it can't magically conjure it up. We need businesses, workers, investors and entrepreneurs to all back this country and build our economy. It doesn't matter whether your income comes in a pay packet from investments in dividends or profits. It is a poor politics that is so focused on what people receive that it fails to see that what matters is what people put in. The only way to grow the economy and to create wealth is for people to put in more. So when you create a negative environment for business, when you undermine confidence in our country, when you vilify and penalise people for doing exactly what we need them to do, which is to invest, take risks and work hard, you don't create growth, you hold back growth. And more than that, the promise of growth today does not pay the bills. The growth tomorrow does not pay the bills today. This is not the first government to peddle the borrow to grow myth. But time and again, we have seen the same ending. Not higher growth, but higher debt, higher inflation, and higher taxes. But Madam Deputy Speaker, whatever you think about the economic arguments around today's budget, there is a more fundamental point that I want to conclude with. The Prime Minister has talked relentlessly about trust. Yet today's budget reveals, above all, that the Labour Party... Today's budget reveals, above all, that the Labour Party did not tell the truth. They said they wouldn't fiddle the figures. They have. They said they wouldn't increase borrowing. They have. They said they wouldn't raise taxes on working people. They have. Broken promise after broken promise, and it is the working people of this country that will pay the price.